Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again. This is Bold City Civics. My name is Sheldon Hall. I'm a writer, I'm a reporter, I'm a broadcaster, I'm a record producer, and whatever else the situation requires. Joining us, as always, is the man who made this project happen, veteran educator, the pride of Detroit, Mr. John Lewis Meeks Jr. Say hello.
Hello, greetings and salutations.
Yes, yes. Thank you for supporting the Bold City Civics podcast. You can always find us on your favorite podcast platform and also find us on YouTube as well. Today's episode, we've talked about different aspects of local politics, local government, how things are organized. We've dealt with city council, we've dealt with the mayor, we've dealt with the sheriff, and now we're going to continue the sort of general law enforcement theme today by talking about the state attorney's office. The state attorney is basically the prosecutor of prosecutors here in Jacksonville. Almost all criminal cases that happen in Jacksonville will go through our state attorney's office, except for those things that may have like a federal component. Certain crimes you can commit locally automatically attract attention of federal authorities, and certainly anything that crosses over state lines. And of course, here in Northeast Florida, we're so close to Southeast Georgia, that happens a lot, particularly with things like drug crimes, gun crimes. As soon as you cross over the border, it's automatically a federal thing. But 9 times out of 10, your cases will be referred to the state attorney's office. As a sort of background, the country in general, the United States, has 94 judicial districts around the country. And here in the state of Florida, we have 20. We have 67 counties in Florida, and those 67 counties are covered by the 20 judicial districts. Those of us who live here in Northeast Florida are under the jurisdiction of the 4th Judicial Circuit of Florida that covers Duval County, Clay County, and Nassau County. The current state attorney is a lady named Melissa Nelson. Melissa Nelson has been there since, I believe, 2016. The state attorney position is an elected position. It comes up every 4 years during even-numbered years. The last one was in 2020, so 2024 will be when the state attorney's position comes up again for election. All these public entities have websites and things like that, and I always like to give a little shout out to the state attorney's office because among all local political governmental organizations, the 4th Judicial Circuit has one of the cleanest and most efficiently organized websites out there, which is important because, as you can imagine, the volume of cases, the caseload that the state attorney's office has to deal with is truly staggering, and so it takes tremendous effort to organize all these cases and I believe a couple hundred different state attorneys that are involved in that process. She's been there, Ms. Nelson has been there since 2016. Prior to that, Angela Corey was state attorney for, I believe, 8 years. Yeah, 2008 through 2016. Before that was Harry Shorstein, who was a state attorney from 1991 up through 2008. And Shorstein took over in 91. The election was scheduled for 1992, but he took over for Ed Austin, who was state attorney at the time. He had just been elected as mayor, and then once he vacated the state attorney position to become mayor, Shorstein picked it up. And this really is close to my heart because Ed Austin was one of my favorite people ever. As a young man in my early 20s, in the early 2000s, I used to run into him over at the Starbucks in Riverside, and at that point he was long retired, and we would talk about the old days, particularly the consolidation era. Austin was the state attorney from 1968 up through 1991, except for a couple of years where he was doing something else. But he left and then he came back to the position. And prior to becoming the state attorney, the longest reigning state attorney in the history of Jacksonville in that circuit, prior to that, he was also the public defender. He was the first official public defender of consolidated Jacksonville right before he took over as the state attorney. And as that office goes, it's a very interesting thing. The majority of cases that they deal with are, fairly minor things like traffic things, DUIs, shoplifting, petty theft, simple assault, and whatnot. But then, of course, as you know, here in Northeast Florida, as everywhere else, crime is a big deal. So they've had to deal with some of the most extreme and most notable murder cases, kidnapping, human trafficking, sorts of things that have happened in local history. And then, of course, like I said before, if you look at something like kidnapping, drug trafficking, gun running, and stuff, a lot of that has a federal coefficient once you go over that border to Georgia. Um, the state attorney's office is controversial because they're prosecutors. We're inclined to be a little bit skeptical of established authority, but they have a job to do, and they do it fairly well. And then you've got the public defender's office, which is kind of a separate entity, you know, but still somewhat connected. The head public defender, uh, that's not an elected position, but the state attorney's office is, and they kind of it's an adversarial relationship, but it's also a collaborative effort in the sense of you think about, say, professional sports or something where you can be on opposite teams, and when the game's going on, you're competing heavily against each other. But when the game's not going on, everyone's all basically friends. And there's an adversarial relationship in the courtroom setting. They both go all out to either convict the defendant or get the defendant exonerated. But behind the scenes, they're all very closely connected, working together along with the local judiciary with the intent of processing these cases as quickly as possible, getting trying to keep people out of jail unless necessary. Especially now, and you'll see this around the country, bed space in jails and prisons is at a premium. And especially in the pandemic era, you may have noticed stories where a lot of people would get released or get early furloughs or get early parole, in order to free up space and to kind of keep people, from spreading the COVID in the jail setting, which is a big deal. Like some our state prisons here have had many cases of COVID that just sort of because that of course that's a place where sanitation and ventilation and social distancing, these aren't really things you can do there. Now, the most extreme case in that regard would be probably Rikers Island in New York. Rikers Island has, especially in the early days of the pandemic, the first couple of months of the pandemic, dozens and dozens of people were being targeted, not targeted, but they were catching the COVID. So that's a thing that's happening now. You may notice that over the last couple of years, we spend a lot of money on our courthouses. We've got a federal courthouse and a county courthouse, both of which are booked solid 5 days, out of the week. But now we have a lot of remote trials happening. You've got the judge, the prosecutors, the defendants, all coming in remotely, and that's led to some interesting issues. Lots of situations where people thought the mics on their computer were not on, but they were actually on, and that's caused a few issues. The next state attorney's race will be in 2024. Melissa Nelson. Now she is the second female state attorney that we've had. She took over from Angela Corey back in 2008. As things currently stand, no one has stood out as a potential challenger to Melissa Nelson. If I had to bet money right now, I would assume that she will probably run without opposition in 2024, but you never know. This, of course, 2022 is an election year on the state and federal level, and then coming into 2023, we've got a whole slate of local elections happening, and one election may influence another and vice versa. So coming out of 2023, by summer 2023, say 18 months from now, we'll know pretty solidly if Ms. Nelson will be able to run unopposed or if someone will come up to challenge her. challengers for that position usually come from within the state attorney system themselves. I mean, the state attorney system itself. So as you can imagine, if you have a job, you're not going to necessarily want to try to take your boss's job unless you're sure that you can succeed. Because if you challenge the state attorney and you lose, that's really not good for your career, as many people can attest if they were around to attest. Rest in peace. And there's much more to say about that. We may do another episode getting even deeper into the court system, which is deeply complex. The process by which cases go from the local county level up through the state level, up through the national, the circuit courts of appeals, all the way up to the Supreme Court. There's a process, and we will revisit that in the future. But for now, I want to give you just a little quick overview of how this works. This is episode 6 of Bold City Civics. We are here to help you understand how your community works and how to engage the community on your own terms. Find the things that you are interested in, and maybe pursue these as careers in your own right down the road. But at the very least, being an active citizen and participating. Once again, my name is Sheldon Hall. I am joined, as always, by the major domo of this operation, Mr. John Lewis Meeks Jr.
Hello.
And goodbye. Thank you so much for your support. We'll see you again very, very soon.